Thank you so much for clicking on my video. And if you're returning, welcome back to my channel. Today, we will continue our recap of Diana, Her True Story in Her Own Words by Andrew Morton. Now, we are picking up with this recap from the point in which she meets Charles and begins their relationship, their courtship, their marriage, and the early days or the early years of their marriage. There's so much here. I wanted to go all the way up until the point that we meet Harry. However, there is so much to dissect in this first year, all the way up until William is born, that I just didn't want us to be here for 2 hours. So we will continue from that point next time. But today we are going to start from the point in which she meets Charles and all the way up until the point that she gives birth to William. So let's get into it. Once again, thank you so much for clicking on my video. If you have not already, feel free to go ahead and like this video, subscribe to my channel, and turn on that notification bell. Did I forget to mention to like the video? Maybe I did, maybe I didn't, but if you didn't hear it, don't forget to like the video. Thank you so much to everyone who watches, subscribes, has participated, and helps the channel and supports the channel. And I'm going to curtsy to the royal court and the kings and queens. Thanks so much for all you do, and thanks to the members. So today, we are picking up from the point in which Diana meets Charles. We have already dissected her early life, her years in school, which was very fun, by the way. I really enjoyed dissecting that part of Diana's life. So we'll dig into that lack of experience and how that played into what she endured while in the royal family in those early years. So she said she knew Queen Elizabeth from the time that she was a child, as we talked about. However, because of that, she was never intimidated by Queen Elizabeth. She also mentioned later that Queen Elizabeth had a remarkable way of putting anyone at ease. When you talk to her, she was just very easy to talk to, and she was a good listener. So I didn't know that about Queen Elizabeth. Obviously, how would I know that? But I really like to learn that fact about her, and it makes sense when you find out more things to come between Diana and Queen Elizabeth and some of the conversations that they had. She felt like after getting to know the royals a lot better, especially when she came closer to being of age, when she was around 16, she always just perceived their lifestyle as awful. Like from the very beginning, Diana always pitied them. She never envied them. She never really, she didn't covet their lifestyle at all. She was from a noble family as well, so she already had notoriety. She came from a very solid family upbringing, lived in huge houses. Her family had money. So it wasn't like this was some saving grace being married into this family. It was almost like living a life of luxury and then being put into a birdcage. And that's essentially what we see unfold. So she said that she remembers Charles coming to Althorpe with his Labrador, Harvey, and she just perceived him as a very sad man, which will come into play later. She also gives us insight into the friendship between Charles and her sister, Sarah. Now, this is her older sister, and she said that Sarah was all over Charles like a bad rash. Ma'am, she did not hold back. And you know how I feel about memoirs that are honest. Yes, give them to me, please. And she actually perceived it as Charles hating it. So we do see that maybe Charles has a little bit of a thing for the chase, which kind of makes sense, actually. At the time, she was only 16 years old. She was a minor, and she described herself at the time as fat and pudgy. Now, keep in mind, she'd been taking those cooking classes, which we talked about last time, and she said she would get in trouble during those cooking classes for always dipping her fingers in the saucepans, and she just loved sauces and loved trying all the things that she was making. So she had gained a significant amount of weight. But when you see her in those early years, when they're trying to say that she was fat and pudgy, Diana was skinny. She was skinny, but at the time, the beauty standards were different. And again, this is from a noble family, and this is in a whole different world of aristocracy. So their view of overweight and skinny is very different than most of ours, I'm sure. So I think that's why she perceived herself that way. But she wasn't too fat and pudgy because Charles was looking her way. So that night, they invited Charles over. He was at Althorpe, and he was there as a friend of Sarah's. But that night at dinner, he came up to Diana, and they had a nice dance. She also realized that he was interested in her at that point because he was pulling her to the side to talk to her. He was dancing with her, and he just showed way more interest in Diana than her sister Sarah. And this amazed Diana. First of all, during school, Diana avoided boys. She just felt like they were nonsense. They weren't going to be ready for anything serious, and she didn't even really know herself. She had a high level of discernment to be so young. She avoided boys at that time because she wasn't interested. She was kind of just trying to focus on developing herself and growing up. And she actually acknowledged that because she was so young, she knew that she did not have the emotional wherewithal to maintain a relationship with anyone. So up until this point, Diana has never had a boyfriend. She's never even really had guys show significant interest in her. So fast forward, the first man essentially that shows you any interest is the prince. This took her by surprise, and she described it as amazing. So she wasn't even interested in Charles, essentially because she didn't think he would be interested in her. She was significantly younger than him. So she really didn't see the point in even kind of entertaining the fantasy. So when he was pursuing her and not Sarah, who would have been, from the outside looking in, a more appropriate partner, he just was not interested. So he isolated her and was pulling her to the side and dancing with her, having deep talks with her. And she said she was very amazed. She said, "Why would anyone like that be interested in me?" And that is a direct quote. You remember when I said that sometimes we don't know what we offer because we see ourselves from the outside, so we have no idea who can bask in our own light? We don't know the effect we have on other people. Sometimes we are sitting on remarkable capabilities and abilities, and we don't even know because we're used to it. So for 2 years, Charles and Sarah kind of hung out on and off, and in some ways it could be perceived as dating, but there is not a lot of clarity around how far that relationship went. So I would assume that it didn't go very far as like physical or just open declarations of being in a romantic relationship. So it wasn't as serious as a lot of people like to make it out to be. But when Charles turned 30, he invited both Sarah and Diana to his party. When Diana was invited, Sarah was like, "Well, hold on, I know why I got the invite, but why the hell you going?" And even Diana was like, "I have no idea why he is inviting me to this party. I don't know." She didn't think he was still interested in her. This is about 2 years later. Diana is now 18. At this point, Charles is either 27 or 28, and he's hanging out with Sarah, who is closer to his age. He meets her 16-year-old sister again. They were always kind of acquainted. And so he shows interest in her while he's at Althorpe with Sarah. He shows interest in Diana, who at that time is 16. He dates Sarah on and off for 2 years. Dates, we don't really know how far that went. But then when he turns 30, at this point Diana is 18, he extends an invitation to Sarah for his birthday party, but he also extends an invitation to Diana for his birthday party. This kind of takes Sarah by surprise, and she's kind of showing what is described in the book as a little bit of jealousy, like, why are you invited? Well, now we know he was interested still. After this party, Diana was invited to stay at her friend Philip DePass's house. And the reason she was invited was because Philip DePass was also friends with Charles. Charles was coming to stay at his house for a couple of days. And Philip extended an invitation to Diana as well. He said that you are a young blood, and I think you would enjoy his company, and I think that he would enjoy yours. So Diana accepted the invitation because this is also her friend. She trusts him. And so she goes and stays at his house. She said while she was there, they definitely struck up a lot of really good conversations. He kind of opened up to her a couple of times while they were talking. She did note like that he seemed lonely. And she is clearly an empath. I think that's one of the things that's present in this book the most. She can actually like really pick up, and she's very perceptive of other people's emotions. And so her whole modus operandi is when there's a fire, run in and save versus run away and hide. And so she saw this sad man who was of nobility and who was royal, and she extended some sort of friendship, but she also extended a lot of comfort. And she told him outright, like, this is the thing about Diana, she spoke her mind, and that is so present in the book. And so she told him outright, "When I saw you at Lord Mountbatten's funeral, you just looked so sad and lonely." And he gave her a look like he was seen for the first time, essentially, like he recognized her and she recognized him. It was this very sweet and charming moment, and it makes sense why they had that early connection. It seems like they complemented each other well, which they had enough to build a relationship, but he chose not to grow that relationship, which doesn't make sense because she did. She wanted to grow their relationship. She saw the potential, and that's so clear, especially in those early years of their marriage, where they're really leaning into the fact that she doesn't have a lot of experience. So her discernment is not exactly going to lead her to be able to properly assess the situation she's in because she's so young and lacks experience. And I feel like that's a lot of the reason why she was the perfect candidate to be his wife. I think he appreciated her, but I personally, just reading this book, I don't think he ever really loved her. I think he saw her as a great puzzle piece to complete this picture so I can get on with my life. I'll tell you why I think that in a minute. So while at Philip DePass's house, they have these deep talks, and she said out of nowhere, Charles is just all over her, and she is not comfortable with this at all. She said he was too obvious, and it was so odd. Again, Diana has never had a boyfriend. She doesn't say it outright that she's never had a physical experience, but it is heavily implied that she's never slept with anyone and that this is just a new experience overall. She said that she talked to him again about his apparent loneliness, and she outright just told him, you need someone that's going to look after you. And he really appreciated that. The next minute after having this deep conversation, he just jumps on her. Like, imagine talking to someone about something so deep, like a funeral or loss or grief or things like that. And then all of a sudden they're just feverishly hounding you physically. It's a lot on a person. She said she really didn't know how to cope with this kind of drastic jump and leap into physical behavior. So she said they continued having conversations, and then he invited her to Buckingham Palace. He said, I got to go to Buckingham to work. I really want you to come with me. She was really impressed, but she said it wouldn't make sense for her to be at Buckingham Palace. People would be asking questions like, what are you doing there? Aren't you supposed to be at Philip DePass's house? So she said it was too much for her, and she denied his request. Instead, she did go to stay with her sister Jane at Balmoral. Now, Jane's husband was Robert Fellows. He was the assistant private secretary for the Queen. And so she did go to visit her sister, and while there, she was able to spend time with Charles. Now, this is her sister Jane, not Sarah, the one that Charles had dated before. So she said every time she went to Balmoral or visited Charles at work, which is Buckingham Palace, every time she visited him, the Parker Bowleses were there. And that is Camilla and Andrew Parker Bowles. So during this courtship, things were going well. They'd only had essentially 13 real dates before they got engaged. But these encounters were like weekend-long getaways with other friends or week-long stays and stuff. So these weren't exactly like 13 dinner dates. These were 13 encounters that could have lasted for who knows how long. But they did have a really great rapport, and he did like her a lot, and she loved him. Like, she fell in love with him. She said that their courtship was going really well until the press got wind of it. And where have I heard this before? I feel like I've heard this tune sang before. I don't know. Y'all let me know in the live chat. Who else said that things were going great until the press got involved? Let me know. She said that the press became unbearable for her roommates, and she just felt like it was not fair to put them through that. The feeling at that time, though, because they had publicly started dating and people had started picturing them together and kind of commenting on them being together, not Diana, other people, not even Charles, but she said that the feeling at that point from Sandringham, which is the Queen, was, you need to find a bride, you are 30, you need to get on with it. And it was not so subtle, like they were aptly applying pressure to Charles to propose to Diana. So he proposes the next day. The night before, after the phone call, she stayed up talking to her friends, and they all just kind of knew, like, girl, this is not just a regular date. He's going to propose tomorrow. And she said something in her just knew that that was what was going on. So she is excited, mind you. So she goes to see Charles, and in the nursery, he proposes to her. And she said it kind of caught her off guard that she actually laughed. She was just so young. She's 19. So she's just kind of not taking any of this like super seriously. She's just not an adult at this point. And I don't think it's fair to even expect that of her. And that will come into play later. Why I think it's crazy that they expected a 19-year-old to behave as an adult. After the engagement, like, she starts meeting his friends, and she's hanging out with a lot of his friends, and they have an inner circle. Now, the circle grows over time, but something that Diana makes sure to note for us is that the people who started the circle, like the beginning people, they were snobs. And the people who entered the circle later, like herself and a few others and a few other wives or husbands that came in later because they married in, were all very pleasant. And so it was almost two circles within one group. The original friend group, and then their spouses and the people who came later were their own friend group. And the snobs were the bane of Diana's existence. She could not stand the snobs. Diana was from a noble family, but she was not a snob. That was something that just never appealed to her. So you see this kind of divide take part in a lot of the shenanigans that go on. So as she gets to know Charles's friends, sometimes she stays over with the Parker Bowleses. She said that she was staying with them at Bowleyhyde Manor a lot. And especially since the press had been kind of hounding her flat and following her everywhere she went. At one point, she had to drive her grandmother's car because everywhere she went, they were following her car, but they didn't know what her grandmother's car looked like. So that was the only way she could really get away. But after the engagement, she stays at Bowleyhyde Manor with the Parker Bowleses. And while there, she and Camilla actually strike up what she perceives as a genuine friendship. Again, remember when I said it benefited everyone else but Diana for Diana to be as naive as she was because she was so young and inexperienced? This is one of those moments. She did not realize that the reason Camilla was keeping her close was so that she would know where she was at all times, and then Camilla could be wherever she needed to be with Charles. And it is so clear in the book, and Diana even references this and is like, I didn't even realize what was going on. She's actually pulling Diana aside. Mind you, Camilla is married with kids, and she's pulling Diana aside, who's staying with her, making such comments like, don't force him into this. Don't make him do this. He doesn't have to get married to you. Don't make him do this. And Diana's just like, she's a concerned friend. That's it. Now, see, me, myself, in my 30s, I would have been like, what's it to you? Is this coming from you or Andrew, your actual husband, honey? Worry about him. But it's almost like an open secret. So everyone's in on the open secret but Diana. How unfair. Again, something that I did not know in the engagement, he proposed to her. He started by saying, I missed you so much, because they hadn't seen each other for a little while. And when he proposed, she laughs at first, but then she's kind of overcome with emotion, and she says, I just love you so much. And this fool says to her, whatever love means. Like, completely dismisses Diana. And we know he says that again during the engagement video. Like, he's consistently trying to undermine emotional attachment. After their engagement, she goes to Australia for 3 weeks. And the whole time she's there, she's kind of opining for him. She misses him. Every time she calls him, though, he's never available. For 3 weeks, her fiance is never available on the phone. And he never calls her back. He never calls her at all for 3 weeks. And she said this felt very odd, but because he's royal, she just assumed, like, this is how it has to be. He's really a busy man. She doesn't really realize that he might be busy with other people. So when she returns from Australia, she gets home to her flat, and Charles sends her flowers. But when she opens the flowers up, there's no note. And that's when it dawns on her. These aren't from Charles. This is from his office. They're trying to do the decent thing, and they're trying to be tactful to make sure that their relationship is still going forward. But they're not really from Charles. So it kind of takes the fun out of it. So she describes their relationship and falling in love as very gradual. It's very slow. And even in her talking about this piece, I'm wondering, as a reader, knowing what I know now, the gradual falling in love could have very well just been her falling in love and him playing a role. Because when you hear him speak to her, it does imply that there's a relationship on both sides and that he's interested in her. But when you watch his actions, it doesn't feel that way. And so I think it was gradual because he was doing the bare minimum and very little to maintain the romance in their relationship. I don't think he was trying to develop feelings for Diana. I think he was just trying to make sure he did what his mom told him to. She said that press harassment became so unbearable after the engagement that she was actually unable to go very many places. It put her friends and her roommates under tremendous amounts of pressure. The reporters and press were calling her all the time. And when she reached out to the palace and was like, listen, this is like a barrage of harassment from the press. They're always calling to ask me to confirm or deny stories. The palace told her she was on her own. This is my issue. Like, so people love to say the royal family and the firm are a family and a business. So let's look at this from a business standpoint. From a business standpoint, when you realize every time we onboard a new team member, they go through this phase where they have little support, no protection, yet they are exposed to the world and they are a household name and they are facing credible threats. But because they haven't entered the family, there's really not a whole lot we can do. Maybe look at that piece of your onboarding process and say there has to be an in-between process to where when we transition people into this organization, we can begin to keep them safe from the moment of inception. Once we realize this is going to be a stable situation for us and this is going to happen, we would know before the press would know. So we need to get things in order to make sure everyone who enters this family enters in a seamless and a protected manner. That's not happening. From an organizational standpoint, you're not doing your due diligence. When you recognize you have the same problem over and over, you need to go ahead and be reactive and then proactive. React to the issue by creating some sort of remedy, and then be proactive to take preventative measures for the future. That's not happening. As a family, she couldn't stay in a spare room. So anyway, it just doesn't make sense. They are just not smart people over there. She said the papers used to call her at 2 a.m. sometimes, and because her friends were afraid of missing calls from their own families, they couldn't take the phone off the hook. She said at least 30 or more paparazzi just followed her around consistently all the time. And this is not Diana, the adult. This is Diana, the 19-year-old who just got engaged, Prince Charles. And she's overwhelmed by this. Who wouldn't be? So she said even in this, she never really complained to Charles, but she did discuss it with him that she wasn't getting any support. He not only didn't show her any support from himself or say like, oh, wow, I'm so sorry the palace didn't work that out for you. Let me see what I can get done. He didn't say any of that. He complained to her that because she had stayed at Bowleyhide with the Parker Bowleses, 4 paparazzi had followed Camilla around for a short while, and it was stressing Camilla out. He complained, let's just backtrack. He complained to his fiance, who is being hounded by 35 or more paparazzi all the time. He complained to her that his friend, at the time Diana thinks they're just friends, that his friend is being followed by 4 paparazzi. Mind you, his friend has a whole husband. They need to work that out. So because of all of this, there were times where she had to leave Coleherne Court through a window using her bed sheets. Like she had to like climb down using her bed sheets out of her kitchen window so that the paparazzi wouldn't see her and follow her around. It was just that bad. And I mentioned that she did stop using her own car. After a while, she only used her grandmother's. She said, again, when she received no support from Charles, no support from the royals, and no support from their press office, she felt very much abandoned and alone. She said she cried often and she just felt abandoned. So now at this point, she has been through the ringer. The inner circle and the families know that they're engaged, but now it's time to tell the public. So the engagement announcement is put out. She then is offered the opportunity to live in Clarence's house, which she accepts. And she said when she pulled up to Clarence's house, no one was there to welcome her. She said it was so cold and distant that it felt like a hotel. And she even says that the night before the engagement announcement, her police officer, like her police detail, he looks at her and he says, this is your last night of freedom for the rest of your life. You better make the most of it. So prior to marrying into the royal family, she wasn't without any support. Her grandmother was really in her corner. And her grandmother tells her that the lifestyle is not going to be for Diana. And she tries to warn her essentially. Now from this, I couldn't really gather if she was warning her in order for her to renege and to step away, or if she was just trying to prepare her. But nevertheless, she let her know, like, this lifestyle is not for you. Their sense of humor is not going to match yours. It would not suit you and you're going to be miserable. And Diana is then taking us through her own life as it stands before she was a royal. And she says she had an amazing life. She was always Lady Diana Spencer. She lived in a big house. She had her own money and she loved everything about her life. She loved being a kindergarten teacher. She loved living in a flat with her roommates. She just felt like she had everything. and then she entered the royal family. So after she moves into Clarence house and the engagement is announced, it's now time to pick her engagement ring. So the jeweler, as she describes, a person with a briefcase comes along, but the jeweler comes and meets with Diana and the queen. They look at a wide array of rings, and Diana picks the sapphire ring that we all know about. And it's then that the queen foots the bill. Like, Charles is not part of the process. But here's the thing. Diana describes this as everyone working together to pick the best ring for her. And she said everyone was involved in the decision. But I know that the crown kind of made it like the queen was a little bit resentful that Diana picked that ring because she said it was the most expensive. But actually, the queen was a big part of choosing the ring that she chose. And the queen was happy to foot the bill. But again, what's missing from this is just any kind of involvement from Charles. Like, the romance is not there. He didn't even pick the ring to present to her. And, she just accepted it. And she didn't know any better. But then you hear Harry talk about how he was so meticulous in picking and creating Meghan's ring. He wanted to make sure they used the Welsh gold. He wanted to make sure they had the right diamonds from Botswana. He wanted to make sure that he included his mother's diamonds. He really went all out to make it special for her. And that's one of the things that I thought was so sweet. But then when you hear this experience, it's truly like her baby boy heard everything she said loud and clear and made sure that he did not repeat that pattern. The whole time I'm listening to this, I'm remembering Spare. And it's really hard not to do that. Diana deserved everything. She did. She didn't get any of it. So the first royal engagement as an engaged couple, they are not married yet, but they go to a royal engagement. And for this event, she picked a black dress from the Emanuels. Now, I have talked about this dress before. It is gorgeous. And when she goes into Charles's study to show him her dress, she was like, she thought she looked great because women at the time of her age wore dresses like this. Black was considered a very smart color. It was the best color that you could have in your wardrobe, and it was always appropriate. And when she walked into Charles's study before the event, he looks at her and he says, "You're not going to wear that, are you?" He's an asshole. Now, again, she is just engaged. They're not married. So she's like, well, I'm not part of your family yet, so I should be able to wear what other women my age are wearing. And to be fair, she didn't know about protocol. This is a consistent issue we see Diana bring up. We heard Meghan bring up. We heard Harry bring up. The women are not briefed on what protocol actually is, and then they're slammed for it behind closed doors when they don't follow these imaginary rules that are unwritten and not presented beforehand. If you want people to follow your little raggedy ass rules, please put them somewhere where these women will know it. Even their dressers, their assistants, whoever is dressing them, their seamstresses, their wardrobe personnel, the men in gray, give their asses something to do. Somebody somewhere should have these rules somewhere, and they should be presenting them to people during the onboarding process. I mean, come on, the Princess Diaries got it right. We need princess lessons. First engagement, Diana describes as a chaotic mess. She doesn't know protocol. She doesn't know what hand to carry her evening bag in or her clutch. She doesn't know who gets out of the car first. She doesn't even know what foot to lead with. She doesn't know who's supposed to enter the venue first, where she's supposed to stand or sit, how she's supposed to stand or sit. And she just feels extremely overwhelmed. She said it was so chaotic and she was very overwhelmed. I can understand that. As somebody with anxiety, that's me trying to go out to dinner on a regular night. So I can't even imagine how that must have been, knowing all eyes were on her. So we did talk about the fact that she stayed with Camilla and Andrew at Bowley-Hyde Manor, but we didn't really go piece by piece to talk about her first meeting Camilla. So when she first moved into Clarence house, there was a note waiting for her from Camilla, and Camilla was inviting her to lunch. So it's like Camilla is always, throughout the entire book, always one step ahead. Now, the reason I'm talking about it in this order is the book is literally, this part of it is just Diana essentially conversationally talking about these events, but they're not in chronological order. Camilla is always like one step ahead. She not only knows what's happening, but she always knows what's going to happen. So it's clear she has the inside tip. It's clear that inside tip is Prince Charles. So, but not to Diana at this point. And so she gets the note and she's like, great, I'll start making friends. This is wonderful. And so she goes to lunch, and Camilla is consistently asking her about Highgrove and, are you planning to go hunting with him when he goes to Highgrove? How often are you going to be at Highgrove? And we'll later find out why she was doing that. We know why. Diana goes on to say that She felt like she was integrating seamlessly into his circle of friends, but she later realized that they didn't like her because they perceived her as a threat. She also mentioned that during the engagement, Camilla became an ever present issue in their life. At one point during their engagement, she overhears Prince Charles in the bathtub. Now, we already know Harry told us that Charles loves his bathtub time. But Diana hears Charles in the bathtub on the phone talking to Camilla, and he tells Camilla, no matter what happens, I will always love you.
We always had discussions about Camilla, though. I once heard him on the telephone in his bath, on his handheld set, saying, "Whatever happens, I will always love you." I told him afterwards that I had listened at the door, and we had a filthy row. When I arrived at Clarence House, there was a letter on my bed from Camilla, dated 2 days previously, saying, "Such exciting news about the engagement. Do let's have lunch soon when the Prince of Wales goes to Australia and New Zealand. He's going to be away for 3 weeks. I'd love to see the ring. Lots of love, Camilla."
She says at that point, they had a huge fight. Now, Diana gives me the impression, especially at this point, she makes it a point to note that she speaks her mind. She gives me the impression of someone who will let your ass have it in an argument. She said he deserved it. How dare you get on your raggedy ass phone and your musty ass bath, probably didn't even have no bubbles, on the phone talking nasty. So she goes to lunch with Camilla. And Camilla is essentially telling Diana Charles's schedule throughout their entire engagement. She was like, well, yeah, he's going to be away for 2 weeks here. He's going to have to go here at this point. So during that time, why don't you and I just hang out? And Diana is like, what the hell? And she even notes, like, I don't have the experience to realize when someone is jealous or someone is trying to intimidate me or read between the lines. But later, I did fill in the gaps.
Emily Van Cutsum used to be my best friend. She told me about Camilla. She's very formidable, very outspoken.
Remember when I said Camilla was an ever-present issue in their relationship? That keeps coming up throughout this whole early life in marriage. Charles has a bracelet made for Camilla.
Somebody in his office told me that my husband had had a bracelet made for her, which she wears to this day. It's a gold chain bracelet with a blue enamel disc. It's got G and F entwined in it. Gladys and Fred. They were their nicknames. "Oh, what's in that parcel?" He said, "Oh, you shouldn't look at that." I said, "Well, I'm going to look at it." I opened it, and there was a bracelet, and I said, "I know where this is going." I was devastated. This was about 2 weeks before we got married. He said, "Well, he's going to give it to her tonight." So rage, rage, rage. Why can't he be honest with me? But no, he, Prince Charles, cut me absolutely dead. It's as if he had made his decision, and if it wasn't going to work, it wasn't going to work. He'd found the virgin, the sacrificial lamb, and in a way, he was obsessed with me. He took the bracelet, lunchtime on Monday. We got married on the Wednesday. I went to his policeman, who was back in the office, and said, "John, where's Prince Charles?" And he said, "Oh, he's gone out for lunch." So I said, "Why are you here? Shouldn't you be with him?" "Oh, I'm going to collect him later."
Diana is over it. She's had enough. There's been a few instances where she's caught his private secretary lying to her. And so Diana's just kind of like, you lying heifer, I'm done. And so Diana goes upstairs with her sisters and she's like, I'm done with this. I'm leaving. I'm not going to marry him. Like, she's ready to back out. And her sisters are like, you can't. Your name and face are already on the towels. You are already everywhere as the future princess. You can't leave. You've got to do this. And she's pissed. She wants to back out, and they literally just tell her, you can't. That's just not a possibility. So one of the things that she notes about living at the palace or just being at Buckingham Palace is just how cold everybody is. She says that most of the time, she said they have no empathy. They're very cold and they lack any compassion. And that's what brings me back to what I was saying when I said Charles is not the only one to blame. I'm not letting anyone off the hook. If anyone watching this wants to say, well, Charles is the only one to blame, do you? But my opinion, especially reading Diana's own words, is that it, again, took a network. Everybody was working in the interest of protecting Charles. But by doing this, and whether that's their job or not, they were put in really shitty positions, but not the Queen Mother. That wasn't her job. She didn't have to talk shit about Diana behind her back. That was an option that she decided to take. She could have just kept her mouth. If nothing else, you could just keep your mouth shut. But you definitely don't have to help him out. Now, his employees, they have an out. It sucks, but that's their job. But seeing how many people, their friends, their family, the Queen, how everyone essentially participated in gaslighting Diana and making her feel crazy for not wanting her husband to cheat on her, that makes me sad, because it's a very different thing to have a shitty ass husband and just be dealing with it. It's another thing for the entire world around you. Everybody in your perimeter is also part of it. That's a network of deceit and lies. I had to feel all encompassing. When I think of it in that term, like everyone who lived with her, worked for her, was around her, was all in on this secret, and their job was priority one, manipulate this one woman. Oh, every time I think about it, I just get so irritated. Disgusting.
Had lunch with my sisters who were there and said, "I can't marry him. I can't do this. This is absolutely unbelievable." They were wonderful and said, "Well, bad luck, Dutch. Your face is on the tea towels, so you're too late to chicken out." On impressions of Buckingham Palace, I couldn't believe how cold everyone was. How I thought one thing, but actually another thing was going on. The lies and the deceit. The first thing that hit me was my husband sending Camilla Parker Bowles flowers when she had meningitis.
So now we get to the wedding day, and her parents were not that supportive for whatever reason. She said that her focus was on getting her father up the aisle, which was some sort of task. She doesn't really go into detail, but it was a task for her. And it was good because that's where she focused instead of being so overwhelmed by all the people. She describes herself as being head over heels in love with Charles at this point. And that's not surprising. Everyone here should be over the age of about 25 to 30. I'm hoping everybody who watches my channel is 30 or more. But if you're younger than that, that's okay too. But most of my subscribers are probably older, like myself. And if you're my age or older, you remember your first love. It's not even about the other person. It's just so exciting because you're feeling all these feelings for the first time, and it just feels like you've been dropped off a cliff head first into a love puddle. Everything is all things about this person, and this is what she's experiencing, that first love type of experience, but it's a prince. And so she is in love with him. She's so in love that she's not really seeing all the signs that she should be seeing. And she's acknowledging, like, yes, he cheated on me throughout our relationship and our engagement, but that's all over now because we're going to be married. And that was essentially the finish line that she was getting to. She always felt like after marriage that he would stop cheating. And so on her wedding day, she's trying to get her dad up the aisle. And on her wedding day, her mother is making everything about herself. Her mother is upset because she didn't get to plan the wedding with Diana. So she is intentionally making things very difficult for Diana. And that became an issue. They didn't speak to each other for, I think, 3 years after her wedding because of the way her mother acted that day. So Diana had a whole lot of stress on her. And then when she walks in, she's like, I get to see my husband. I can't wait. I'm going to be married. And she also describes feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome because she's like, all these people are like here to see us, but they're all fawning over me. I'm still the same person. And all these people are, all this pomp and circumstance is just for me, a kindergarten teacher. And she kind of finds it comical. So she decides, in order to channel her stress, she's going to focus on Charles, getting her dad up the aisle, and bowing to the Queen. That was the thing that stressed her out the most. But then when she walks into her wedding, she looks over to the right, and there's that heifer hoe Camilla in a gray pillbox hat with a veil on it. Got her son standing in a chair to see her, staring her down on her wedding day. Ugh, no tact whatsoever, none. So she said that during the wedding, it all went by really fast. And then after the wedding, they went to take pictures, and then they went to the wedding lunch. She said the entire wedding lunch, Charles didn't say one word to her. This is their wedding day. Their wedding day. It can get really crazy on your wedding day. I cannot imagine getting married in a venue like that with all of that going on, and your husband doesn't say one word to you. and your parents are acting a damn fool and the mistress is over in the corner. Just, you know what? Fight everybody. Shit. Clear the room. At this point, just clear the room, Diana. So they go on their honeymoon, and this is when shit is just weird. This is when I said Charles is a lot more than lonely. His ass is weird. The whole honeymoon, he filled the estate with people. They had guests their whole honeymoon. He also wore cufflinks that were gifted to him by Camilla. And this is not the only time Camilla shows up in their relationship on their honeymoon, but we'll get there. She said Charles spent their honeymoon reading, and he would read all night. And then the next day over lunch, he would analyze the novels that he read the night before with Diana, and he would make her participate.
Out come the Vanderpost novels he hadn't read. Lawrence Vanderpost, the South African philosopher and adventurer, was much admired by Prince Charles. 7 of them. They came on our honeymoon. He read them, and we had to analyse them over lunch every day.
This man's idea of foreplay and honeymoon loving, instead of body rolling it all up and down that honeymoon venue, he said, let's read some books. This man is a whole ass monster. Like, dude. Anyway, she said they never got like one-on-one time outside of analyzing these books on their honeymoon. Also, she said it is now that she begins experiencing more bulimia. And this is something that I didn't cover, but when she was at Clarence's house during their engagement, she started experiencing bulimia, and her sisters came and stayed with her to help her through it. But the staff didn't know what was going on because they kind of kept it as a well-hidden secret. It went away. And after the wedding, she expected things to get better because her stress level would be better. And then on her honeymoon, it came back again. Really bad this time. She said that she was so stressed out on their honeymoon and so overwhelmed with everything that she was dreaming about Camilla.
I remember crying my eyes out on our honeymoon. I was so tired. For all the wrong reasons, totally. My dreams were appalling. At night, I dreamt of Camilla the whole time. Everybody saw I was getting thinner and thinner, and I was being sicker and sicker.
Like, that tells you, like, how implanted this woman had made herself in her mind. It also indicates to me, a non-doctor, just somebody, well, wackadoo with a YouTube channel, it just gave me the impression that this was high level of manipulation. And that's why it's so dangerous. It's awful to have a husband or a partner who cheats on you or disrespects you. That's terrible in and of itself. But to have a network of people working you all the time, that can make you crazy. And this is one of those things that made me feel like they were trying to drive this woman crazy. That's how I feel. She was dreaming about that heifer Camilla. And she describes this time as everyone just simply expecting her to become the Princess of Wales without actually investing any time to help her accomplish that, or even just pointing her in the right direction. She's a very determined person, and when she sets her mind to something, she sees it through. She has no doubt that had she been given the help, she would have adjusted much faster than she did. On this same honeymoon,
we were opening our diaries to discuss various things. Out come 2 pictures of Camilla. On our honeymoon, we have our white tie dinner for President Sade of Egypt. Cufflinks arrive on his wrists. 2 C's entwined like the Chanel C's. Got it in one. Knew exactly. Camilla gave you those, didn't she? He said. Yes, so what's wrong? They're a present from a friend. And boy, did we have a row. Jealousy, total jealousy. And it's such a good idea, the 2 C's. But it wasn't that clever in some ways.
So he's wearing the cufflinks that Camilla bought him. And when Diana was like, are you wearing Camilla's cufflinks? And he was like, it's a gift from a friend. That's a monster. That's a monster. I don't wish him and his wife well. Sorry, I just need to get that out there. And then he also brought photos of Camilla on his honeymoon. Are you crazy? Like, this is a monster. He's over 30, by the way. This is not like a 17-year-old or a 21-year-old or a 25-year-old who was forced to get married and wasn't ready. This is a 30-plus-year-old man. Anyway, she describes her married life post-honeymoon as always feeling like the third wheel. She said that Charles would often prioritize his mother, his father, his grandmother, and then Diana.
He was in awe of his mamma, intimidated by his father, and I was always the third person in the room. It was never, "Darling, would you like a drink?" It was always, "Mummy, would you like a drink? Granny, would you like a drink? Diana, would you like a drink?" Fine, no problem. But I had to be told that that was normal, because I always thought it was the wife first. Stupid thought.
And you're supposed to leave your mother and father and cling to your wife. That's the Bible. But he did not. Now, again, they're royal. And so she was told that that is royal protocol. And everyone else, that's the standard. But in royal life, no. She said because of this treatment of always being shut out, she felt like the third wheel. And then she became very depressed. That's when she started having ideations of suicide, you know. And so I can't say it because of YouTube. But that's when she starts talking to him about these ideations, and he dismisses her. She goes to doctors to talk about it, and they essentially just tell her to get on medicine, and they try to...
By October, I was in a very bad way. I was so depressed, and I was trying to cut my wrists with razor blades. It rained and rained and rained, and I came down early from Balmoral to seek treatment. All the analysts and psychiatrists you could ever dream of came plodding in trying to sort me out. Put me on high doses of Valium and everything else. But the Diana that was still very much there had decided it was just time. Patience and adapting were all that were needed.
They get married in July, and by October, Diana is pregnant with William. And this is a joyous occasion because it gives Diana like hope for the future, especially after all that she's been through. But also it gives her something to focus on outside of her failing relationship with Charles. But while she is pregnant, you know, she's having morning sickness. Pregnancy is really hard on women, not just physically, but mentally. It's also extremely exhausting on women. And so she already had bulimia. The bulimia didn't go away. So she's having morning sickness and bulimia. So she's pregnant, trying to grow a healthy child, and she can't keep anything down. Obviously, this makes her exhausted, and she's still being put on these tours, and no one knows publicly that she's pregnant. So everyone just sees her as being really tired, and some people even described her as lazy because she often just had her head down. But it was because she didn't want to take attention away from Charles. That was the issue. And so this is when it all comes to a head. She talks to Charles about what went down, you know, what she was feeling. He dismisses her, tells her that she's crying wolf. She threw herself down the stairs, and she attempted, you know what?
Every time I got out of bed, I was sick. I threw myself down the stairs at Sandringham. Charles said I was crying wolf, and I said I felt so desperate and I was crying my eyes out, and he said, "I'm not going to listen. You're always doing this to me. I'm going riding now." So I threw myself down the stairs. The Queen comes out, absolutely horrified, shaking. She was so frightened. I knew I wasn't going to lose the baby. Quite bruised around the stomach. Charles went out riding, and when he came back, you know, it was just dismissal. Total dismissal. He just carried on out of the door.
So now we get her and Charles are assigned a trip to Wales, of course, because they're the Prince and Princess of Wales, the only Prince and Princess of Wales that I recognize, particularly Princess of Wales. She said it was still very much a lot on her. She was sick, she was tired, she was pregnant, she had bulimia, and she felt completely unappreciated. She said the royal family was quick to give her criticism, but never gave her praise.
Nobody ever helped me at all. They'd be there to criticize me, but never there to say, "Well done."
Praise. She never felt like she just had the right foot in motion. She always felt like she was running behind. And so she was deathly afraid of doing any engagements by herself. But this opportunity to go to Wales was a big deal for her. And so she learned Welsh. And she gave part of her speech in Welsh.
I'd like to try to express my thanks to you in Welsh also. Mae'n bleser cael dod I Gymru. Hoffwn ddod eto yn fuan. Diolch yn fawr.
That very passable attempt at Welsh pronunciation earned the princess a standing ovation. Prince Charles also joined in, and the princess, now very much more relaxed, provided the translation.
She also described because of her morning sickness, it isolated her from the family because apparently, according to what she was told, she was the first royal wife to ever deal with morning sickness. Now, I don't personally believe that. I think they lied to her to try to make her feel bad about having just normal human needs because at the end of the day, medicine has come further with each generation. So you mean to tell me all these past generations of royals who had less health care, less opportunities to remedy these issues, had no morning sickness, especially a family that's under the veil of never complain, never explain. So they never felt like they had an outlet, I'm sure. I'm sure she was nowhere near the first person to struggle with her pregnancy. Morning sickness is normal. And they tried to stigmatize her and make her feel like shit because of it. And again, a network of deceit and lies. All of them are guilty. But she said that this made her even more prone to feeling isolated, and it even contributed to her having extreme fainting spells. So she was going through it. She felt like her whole world was collapsing around her. And she said no one ever extended sympathy to her. And she noted this. She had extreme morning sickness with William, but she didn't with Harry. Her body knew. She gives birth to William. And even this is trashy. Hear me out. William had to be induced to accommodate the press and their timeline. The pressure was immense from the press. She was due, and so they decided to induce. In addition to inducing because of the press's timeline, they also had to pick a date that aligned with Charles's polo schedule.
We had found a date where Charles could get off his polo pony for me to give birth. That was very nice. Felt very grateful about that. When the Queen came to see William in hospital after I had given birth, she looked in the incubator and said, "Thank goodness he hasn't got ears like his father."
She stayed shading Charles' ass. She was really sick of Charles. Anyway, she said that after William, she then was diagnosed with postnatal depression. She suffered from depression often, and she felt paranoid at that point that something bad would happen to Charles. It was just part of the symptoms from depression. So if he told her, like, I'm coming home, I'll be home in an hour, that whole hour until she saw him, she would think something bad was going to happen to him. She said that in addition to being sick, overwhelmed, tired, and isolated, the family just took over William. Like, she had very little to no decisions that she could make on William. Even William's first photos, even the first family portraits, they left Diana out of most of them. Only included Elizabeth, Charles, and William, as if Diana didn't exist. They made all her decisions for her. They had zero control, and they excluded her from everything. And also, here's the funny part that she said. She said, I was excluded from a lot of the decision making, which is why those first photos were so tacky. I said, oh. First solo engagement was pioneered by her, because up until that point, she was deathly afraid of messing up or skipping on some sort of royal protocol. So she avoided doing things by herself because she felt like she was always getting things wrong. But she had a high level of respect for the Princess of Monaco, Princess Grace, and she was determined to go to her funeral. She was very hurt when Princess Grace passed away. So she asks Charles, what does he think about her going to the funeral to represent the Queen for Princess Grace? He was like, you need to check with her office. So she reaches out to Philip Moore, that's the Queen's private secretary at the time, and he told her it was highly unlikely that she would be tapped to go. She'd only been married into the family for a few months, and it didn't look like something that she would be good at. So Diana admired Princess Grace, like I said, and the reason was because she felt like Princess Grace and her had a very similar path. They were both outsiders who married into a very large and notable family. And so she was determined. She goes directly to the Queen. Now, remember what I said about the Queen making people feel at ease, and that's why people felt comfortable opening up to her. She goes to the Queen, expresses herself openly and says, this is why I want to go. I feel like I can do this and I could represent you at Princess Grace's funeral. And the Queen says, I think you should. I think so. And she said that was her first solo engagement. After she did that engagement, everyone like treated her well. The press was so good to her. Everyone was obsessed with her after that. Now, one of the things that most people note when they talk about Princess Diana is her style. She is synonymous with style. She is an icon in the fashion world. Everybody knows that people still try to dress like her. She's the it girl, even posthumously, the it girl. But she did say the day she got engaged, she didn't have many clothes. She said like a few pieces, but not a lot. So when she got engaged, she and her mother went and bought 6 of everything. She said the royals change clothes 4 times a day. I had no idea, but they change clothes 4 times a day. She often got criticized for all of her new clothes because everything was new, but it was because she didn't have anything else. It wasn't because she was being like a diva. So she reached out to Anna Harvey, who was the editor-in-chief at Vogue at the time, and she helped her with her wardrobe. She said she didn't get any help from the royal family. She didn't know what to wear when, like what type of gloves to wear, what type of shoes to wear. Like she just didn't know. So Anna Harvey helped her build out her entire wardrobe. She said once before she received this help, she wore a faux fur coat, a white one, and the press ate her alive, and she never wore that coat again. One of the things I wanted to note was during this whole passage, she's talking about all these new experiences that she's having. One thing she says is that she met Elizabeth Taylor once, and she found her to be very stuck up and hard to talk to.
And it was agonizing because I didn't find Elizabeth Taylor very easy to talk to. I thought she was stuck up.
And when I tell you I cackled because, again, an honest memoir is a good memoir. And I was cracking up. I've never met Elizabeth Taylor, obviously. God rest her soul. Never met her. But I did not find that hard to believe at all. I did not. So I thought that was funny and I wanted to include it. I do want to talk about the age between Charles and Diana. There's a significant age difference, and that's a very important age difference, and that's why I felt like their relationship wasn't just the result of him not getting to marry the woman that he loves, or him having the issue of missing his first love and dealing with all that, or having the pressure from his family to marry Diana when he really didn't want to. I don't think it was just that. I think it was the fact that they used someone who had no way of being fully prepared at that age with that experience level for entering into a family of that stature and the magnitude of her decisions at that time, especially given their relationship with the press. She was under tremendous pressure with no support, no help, and no education on how to handle it. So I felt like it was very manipulative, but not just that, the age difference. And the reason that's so important is because of maturity level. Now, maturity and behavior is one thing. Maturity and process of thought is another thing. Now, I don't think that Charles was a good person, but do I think he was way too old to be marrying Diana and way too old to be as impatient as he was with her and not have the wherewithal to be proactive about helping her acclimate? Absolutely. I feel like all of that was intentional. I feel like keeping her ignorant to correct protocols and keeping her out of the loop was part of manipulating her. That ambiguity kept her at his whim. It wasn't until she started going out on engagements by herself, really identifying herself as a royal for herself on her terms, really putting herself out there and taking her development and her place in the royal family in her own hands, that we see the Diana that we've come to know today. If she had stayed in his shadow, we never would have seen the Diana that we eventually saw. And part of me feels like because of her determination, that relationship never would have worked, because he needed to keep her small in order to keep himself big. And that is not a character flaw. That was intentional manipulation, which is why I felt like choosing someone at her experience level and at her age was by design. That's why I felt like it was all very predatory in nature. And that's why I don't take skin off Charles, but I also don't take it off of anyone else. He was the power player in this situation. He was the person who held all the weight in the power dynamic between him and his wife. Absolutely. But his entire network was predatory. And that's why I said I don't just blame Charles. I know I get flack for saying that all the time. I don't know why people are jumping to defend people in the monarchy. Don't know why. I won't judge. They were all part of it. Everybody who did not step in, everybody who silently stood by and let that woman get manipulated, everybody who participated and helped make arrangements for Charles, excluding employees, helped make arrangements for Charles, made fun of Diana, continued to isolate her. All of them were in a network of predatory abuse. And that's why I said I do not take skin off Charles, but I definitely don't take it off of his network either. Diana was at the whim of a group of predators. And that is why she had the experience that she had. And that's what's so sad about it. He's someone who seems to have an arrested development issue when it comes to his emotions and his feelings. Been acknowledged that he might suffer from arrested development when it comes to his emotions. He found someone that he could feel like he held the weight in the relationship. And from my experience, that family seems to house a lot of different types of predators. That's why I don't take anything off the entire network of manipulators. So we've gotten to this point. Next time we're going to pick up on from the point in which she gives birth to Harry. Can't wait to talk about this with you guys. But in the meantime, tell me what you think about this part of the book. I really enjoyed reading this. I felt like it was very insightful, and it was great to hear her words and her story from her own mouth and her own words. She does not skimp on being honest, and that is what makes an amazing memoir. So that's all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for watching. If you have not already, feel free to go ahead and like this video, subscribe to my channel, and turn on that notification bell. And if you're interested in becoming a member, use the join button below to become a YouTube member, or use the link in the description box to see what we're doing over on Patreon. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.